So hello friends, welcome back to my channel Medicine on Zeron. Today we'll talk about retina from the aspect of ophthalmology. Okay. So before starting the retina in details, let's talk about the general introductions parts of the eyes. Okay. So what do you know? Basically, if we see the structures, before this eye, this is the what is known as. You correctly write the names over here. Cornea. So we know this structure. There's the what? Cornea over here we will get. And if we just talk in terms of the layers of the eye, the outermost layer, the tough layer, the collagenous layer, that is known as what? Sclera. What's the structure? That is known as sclera. So outside the structure, outermost layer of the eye, that is what? Collagenous, and the tough layer, that is known as sclera. So the outside layer, we'll get it over here. The tough structures, we can say. The collagenous structures. Okay. That is known as what? Sclera. The same will get in these directions also. So we'll get this sclera. Now see, whenever this sclera will be, I have already shown this sclera over here. After this sclera we'll get the vascular layers, that is known as choroid. Vascular layer, that is known as choroid over here. Now see, if you see the structures of the choroid, see the vascular things that is separate the blood from the posterior to the anterior aspects over here up to this much. So if you see the structures after this sclera, we'll get what? The choroid. So we'll get the vascular structures, vascular layer, there is a choroid. Okay, and after that, see what are the structures will get? Retina. Well, now we'll talk about in terms of the retina, where exactly the retina is present over here. See, before that, see, we got it over here. What? The cornea will get what over here? You know it's what? Is the anterior humor. Okay, so let me write it over here. Aqueous humor over here. So we'll get aqueous, aqueous anterior aqueous humor we'll get over here. We'll get the posterior aqueous humor over here, and we'll get what? The vitreous humor over in these regions. And this is the lens, And what are the structures we'll get? This is the we'll get what are this is the iris. This iris. This is also the iris. And this is the structures. If we just show over here with you more clearly, these regions, or if I show in these directions, okay. Let me show you more dark part. So it will be what? It will be the ciliary body. It will be the ciliary body. It will be the what? It will be the iris over here. Okay, and it's the cornea, and it's the lens. The convex lens we are having. Now, if we talk in terms of the retina, where exactly the retina is present, see, this will be the structures of the retina. If I show over here, this is the structures. That means this, the blackish, pigmentous layer will get over here, and there is the neuronal layers will get for the retina. So these structures, that will be the retinal structures of the after the choroid structures. So after the choroid layer, first we got what? The sclera, the fibrous tough layer. Then we got this red, that means the vascular layer. We got the choroid. Then we got the what? Then we got the retinal structures, and this is the vitreous humor. That means we can say the retina, there is a sandwich in between what? The vitreous humor of the eye and the choroid layer of the eye. So if we see exact locations of the retina over here, so we'll get the retina, that will be, we can say, the sandwich in between. Okay, sandwich. Outside we will get what? Outside we will get choroid layer, and inside we will get the vitreous humor. Vitreous humor. Now try to understand, if you see the structures of the retina, we will get the two structures. So one will get the retinal epithelial pigmental layers, and another layers I'll get what? We'll get over here what? The neuronal layers. If I show over here with the, for example, is the retinal structures. The first layer will get the retinal epithelial pigmentosa. So we can write it over here in this way. We'll get retinal epithelial pigment layer. After that we'll get the neuronal layers. The neuronal layers I have shown with this color over here. Try to understand. This is the neuronal layers. This is the pigmentosa layers, the epithelial layers. Okay. So we'll get over here. This is the neuronal layers. So this is the epithelial layers, and we will get this the neuronal layers. So within our neuronal layers, we will get the photosensitive different kinds of the cells in terms of the rod cells, cone cells will get over here. And what are the structures will get this one? This is the retinal what? Epithelial pigmentous layer. So the pigment layer, where we will get the different kinds of pigments in terms of the rhodopsin, iodopsins. I'll talk all about these things in the subsequent parts of the videos. Okay. Now, what do we know about these lines, about this tract? Okay, let me show over here. So see, the blood supply. If you see the blood supply through the choroid layer, the choroid layer, that is what supplying the blood in the posterior part. Then it is supplying also the blood wire within the anterior part. It is also supplying the blood within the ciliary bodies. It is also supplying blood wire within the iris also. So this line, this is known as uveal tract. This is known as uveal tract. So what is uveal tract? Okay, let me show you the different one. So if you write uveal tract, so uveal tract is nothing but, try to understand from here. Okay, we'll get what the posterior part of the choroid is the posterior part of the what? If you see the posterior part of the choroid, then we'll get what? We'll get in the anterior part, we'll get what? We'll get the ciliary body, we'll get the iris. So uveal tract, that is the combinations of posterior side of choroid, along with that we'll get the ciliary body, along with that we'll get what? Along with that we'll get also the iris over here. So these three combinations, whenever we'll get these things, is known as uveal tract. And if you get any kind of the inflammation in these regions, that is known as uveitis. Uveitis, okay? We'll talk about those things in the pathological aspects. Today I'll talk about I'll focus only on the anatomical structures of the retina, okay? Now, see, if we say in terms of the retina, see the photosensitive area, that means the neuronal cells, they're coming or they are just going from the posterior side of the choroid to the anterior side of the what up to there is see, okay, let me write it over here. We'll get the terminations of the retinal neuronal cells or the pigmentous layers where we'll get the terminations. We have to know these things. Now see, if we say this is the light sensitive parts, this is the light sensitive parts of the neuronal cells. So at a time we will get the light sensitive parts of the retina, that will be what? End up. That will be ended where in this locations I am going to talk right now. Where the light sensitive part of the retina, that will be ended, that is known as ores aorta. What is ores aorta? How it is formed? I will talk about right now. Okay. So if you write it over here, the light sensitive part, a light sensitive part of a retina ends at ores aorta. What is the structure of ores aorta over here? You have to know first. So ores aorta, that means if we see the structures over here, see here the retinal structures. If we see, try to understand from this figure. If we see the retinal layer, that means in terms of the what pigmentous layers, in terms of the neuronal layers, that is getting ended over here. That is getting ended. Further, we are not getting the what? The development of the neuronal layers of the retina or the pigmentous layers of the retina. So this point, that is known as what? Ores aorta. Now what is ores aorta? If we see exactly, so now try to understand, this is the what? Cornea, this is the sclera layer. So this is the cornea, this is the sclera layer. So this point, that should be known as what? Corneoscleral junction. This point is supposed to be known as what? Corneoscleral junctions. Now if we see this point, this is corneoscleral junction. Okay, and if we just draw the equator line, through the eyeball, we can get the equator line, for example, in these positions. Now this position is known as equator of eyeball. Equator line, you can write equator of the eyeball. Now see, in between the equator of the eyeball and what? The corneoscleral junctions will get a point that is known as ores aorta, where we will get the retinal layers in terms of the pigmentous layers along with the neuronal layers, that will be ended. That means the photosensitive part, if we write it over here, the light sensitive or the photosensitive part of the retina ends at the ores aorta over here. Now see, if I just show over here in these positions, we will get, for example, in these positions, these regions in the mid, in between what? We can write in the mid also, in the mid of equatorial line of the wall, eyeball and corneoscleral junctions. In between that we will get a structure that is known as ora serrata, where we will get the terminations of the light sensitive part of the retina. Okay, so this is the ora serrata. Hope it's clear. Okay, so the light sensitive part of the retina, that will be ora serrata. Now sometimes we see also that there will be also, try to understand, there will be sometimes we can also see there is the extensions of these layers. We can see the extensions of the retinal layers where, okay, let me show over here this color. Sometimes we can also see there is the extensions of pigmentosal layers of the retina within the posterior. Okay, let me show over here first, then I am giving the names. Sometimes you can also see the extensions of the retinal layers up to this much. Okay, so let's use the different color for it for better understanding purpose. See, so we can also see the extensions of the retinal layers where the extension of a retinal layer will get sometimes where, okay, anterior to the, is the anterior side of the what, ciliary body, and you can get also, the posterior of the iris, posterior of iris. Now why we will get this type of the things, why we will get this type of the extensions? For these things we need to know the embryological aspects of the retina, how the retina is developed. Okay, basically if we see, the retina is the part of the central nervous system. From the embryological aspect, if we see, that's what, the retina is the part of the what? Central nervous system. So how it is formed, we need to know first. Okay, so if we say from the embryological aspects, what type of thing we'll get over here? So let's talk about these things. Now, if we see the embryological aspects of the retina, how the retina is developed. At first, let's write the statement: retina, the part of central nervous system. That means the retina is only the part of the central nervous system that can be seen through the what? Ophthalmoscope. Through the ophthalmoscope, if we just see, we can see also the retina structures over here. Okay. Now, how it is developed? Now, what do we know basically from the ectoderm? If we see the structures from the ectoderm, we'll get the development of the neural tubes. Okay, first how the neural tube is formed, I think you already read it over it. It's very important. Okay, see, if we see in terms of the neuronal tube, first we'll get the ectoderms, then we'll get the bulging of these layers, then we'll get the neural crest cells, then this one, the two terminals, they will get fused with each other, they will form the neural tubes. So in this case we'll get the neural tubes. So whenever we are getting the neural tubes, for example in these structures, the cephalic and the caudal part will get over here, and from here if we see the development of the brain, what are the structures we'll get? First things we'll get, try to understand from here guys. Okay, if you see the development of the brain over here, try to understand this part. Okay, this part, that is known as the procellencephalon, procellencephalon, is the forebrain, is the midbrain, is the mesencephalon, and is the hindbrain, is known as what? Rhombencephalon. Now, further, if we see the development of the forebrain, that means if you see in terms of the procellencephalon, whatever the structures will get, try to understand from this figure. If we see the structures further, we'll get the we'll get the development within the forebrain. That means within the procellencephalon is the midbrain, the hindbrain is the spinal cord will get over here. Now see, we'll get the developments or the divisions of the forebrain or the procellencephalon. We'll get the two structures. One structures we'll get over here, that is known as telencephalon, and another structures we'll get over here, that is known as diencephalon. These structures. we'll get the diencephalon over here. Okay. Now see, from the diencephalon we can get, whenever we get during the embryological development, we will get from the diencephalon we will get the outpouching of one structures. We will get the outpouching of one structures from the diencephalon. This outpouching in this directions will, as well as in this directions, will get this, this part that is known as optic vesicles. This thing is known as optic vesicles. Now we will see these things, the outpouching, or you can say the optic vesicles, that will just go what? That will move forward anteriorly. That will move forward and that will move forward anterior. So we'll get in the anterior directions, it will move. Now whenever it will move, we'll get whatever the structures from here, it will be extended. It will be extended. It will be extended. And if we see the actual structures, whatever the structures we'll get over here, from here we will get the invasions, we'll get the invasions over here. After that, if we see the structures, that will form the optic curve. So what is optic curve? That will form the optic curve. Now what is the optic curve? That is what getting originated from the optic vesicles. So that is optic vesicle that is originated from the diencephalon. How we are getting the optic curve, in which form? Let's show over here. We'll get the optic curve in these directions. We'll get the optic curve basically is the bilinear. If we see the optic curve in these directions, we'll get the bilinear structures, where we'll get inside the retinal pigmentous layers. From here we'll get the development of retinal pigment layers, or the retinal pigmental epithelial layers, and within the insides we'll get the development of the neuronal layers of the retina. We'll get the development of the neuronal layers of the retina. Now try to understand what did I say. Let's see evidence. At first I said the retina, retina is the part of the central nervous systems. That means if we say in terms of the stages of the development of the central nervous system, as far as the embryology is concerned, at first we will get the formations of the neural tube. How the neural tube will form, that is from the ectoderm. So whenever it will be formed, try to understand from this figure. At first we will get the three parts of the brain. We will get the prosencephalon, mesencephalon, rhombencephalon. Further we will get what? The prosencephalon, that will be further divided into telencephalon and diencephalon. And from the diencephalon we will get the outpouching of the one structure that is known as optic vesicles. So we will get the optic vesicle that will move anteriorly, and that will just form what? The optic curve. Within the optic curve, whatever the structures we will get, try to understand from here. We will get the optic curve basically the bilinear, we'll get the structures in terms of the optic curve, that is the bilinear. So where within the bilinear we'll get one layer that will be what? Full of the retinal pigmentosa or retinal pigment layer, and another layer we'll get over here that will be what? That's responsible for producing the neuronal cells. That means in terms of the rod cell and cone cells of the retina. Okay, hope it's clear. Now if we see the structures of the, try to understand, if we see the structures of the retina over here, try to understand the retinal structures. Whenever I just said in terms of the vascular, at that time, see, we'll get the structures in this way. Whenever it will be ended, for example, it is getting ended over here. It is getting ended over here. It will just move the finger-like projections in the OAV projections. It will just form the finger-likes of the OAV projections. From the OAV projections. Okay, whenever it will be ended. So the retinal layers, whenever it will be ended, it will just it will form the what? OAV projections or the finger-like projections. Okay, in this regions it will be formed over here. Now we'll talk about whatever the other structures. For example, if I say any ophthalmologist, whenever using the ophthalmoscope, at that time, for example, he is using the ophthalmoscope. At that time, whatever the structures he can see from these structures, whatever the structures through the ophthalmoscope, the ophthalmologist can see. For example, let's draw these portions over here. This is the ophthalmoscope. This is the eye of the ophthalmologist, and he is trying to see whatever the structures you will see over here. See, he will see directly through the lens all the rays that will go. Okay, so through the lens he will be able to see whatever the structures. He will be able to see basically this structure, and this structure that is known as optic disc. So if you see these structures basically over here, these structures that is known as optic disc. So the ophthalmologist, they will be able to see the optic disc. Along with the optic disc, the ophthalmologist also will be see, or will be also able to see the surrounding little surrounding structures of the what? Surrounding structures around the what? Optic disc. And that is structures along with the optic disc, that is known as what? That is known as, let's write it over here. So we'll get what? We'll get the optic disc plus the surrounding structures. Not all, a little bit portions. For example, from here to here, maximum. That is known as optic fundus. That is known as what? Optic fundus. So try to understand from here. Whenever the ophthalmologist is trying to see through the ophthalmoscope, he can maximum see where the optic what, or he can see the optic disc, and around the optic disc he can see one more structures. That is what, for example, little bit portions around the optic disc. So when you are saying combiningly, when you are seeing them together, this is known as optic fundus. It's known as optic fundus. Now we'll talk about these portions. What are the structures? We can see more in details. Okay. Now, if we see the structures, of the eye, try to understand from here. For example, the two eyes. Definitely, you are having the two beautiful eyes. Okay.